By associating the belief in one God with moral behavior, the Ten Commandments establishes a code of morality and justice for all, the ideal of Western civilization. Despite Josiah's reforms, the ancient Israelites continued to worship other gods. Their acceptance of one God and the triumph of monotheism begins with a series of events vividly attested through archaeology, ancient texts, and the Bible. It starts with the destruction of Yahweh's earthly dwelling, the Jerusalem temple. In 586 BC, after defeating the Assyrians, a new Mesopotamian empire invades Israel. The Babylonians ransack the temple and systematically burn the sacred city. Before his eyes, the Babylonian victors slay the sons of Zedekiah, the last Davidic king, then blind him. The covenant, the promise made by Yahweh to his chosen people and to David, that his dynasty would rule eternally in Jerusalem, is broken. After 400 years, Israel is wiped out.
The destruction of Jerusalem created one of the most significant theological crises in the history of the Jewish people.
The Babylonians round up the Israelite priests, prophets, and scribes and drag them in chains to Babylon. Babylonian records confirm the presence of Israelites, including the king, in exile.
In every age of disbelief, one is inclined to think God is dead. And surely those who survived the fall of Jerusalem must have thought so. After all, how could God allow his temple, his house, the visible sign of his presence among his people, to be destroyed?
Without temple, king, or land, how can the Israelites survive? Their journey begins with the ancient scrolls, which some scholars speculate were rescued from the flames of the destruction.
Among the exiles from Jerusalem to Babylon were priests from the temple. And they seem to have brought with them their sacred documents, their sacred traditions.
According to the widely accepted documentary hypothesis, it is here in Babylon, far from their homes in Israel, that priests and scribes will produce much of the Hebrew Bible as it is known today. Scholars refer to these writers as P, or the priestly source.
It was P who took all of these earlier traditions, the J source, the E source, the D source, and other sources as well, and combined them into what we know as the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible.
But more than just compiling, P edits and writes a version of Israel's distant past, including the Abraham story, that provides a way for the Israelites to remain a people and maintain their covenant with God. But the Israelites still have a problem. How, in a foreign land, without the temple and sacrifice, can they redeem themselves in the eyes of Yahweh?
To assure that divine protection, the P tradition emphasizes observances such as the Sabbath observance. You don't need to be in the land of Israel to keep the Sabbath.
And we have allusions in the biblical writings, in the prophets, to the fact that the exiles also learned to pray in groups in what was to become the forerunner of the synagogue.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
It is during this period, through the exile, that the exiles realized that even far away from their homeland, without a temple, without the priesthood, without kings, they're still able to worship God, be loyal to God, and to follow God's commandments. This is the foundation of Judaism.
The experience of the exile transforms ancient Israelite cult into a modern religion. By compiling the stories of their past, originally written by the scribes J, E, and D, the Exodus from slavery to freedom, Moses and the Ten Commandments, Abraham's journey to the Promised Land, he creates what we know today as the first 5 books of the Bible. Though this theory is widely accepted, physical evidence of any biblical text from the exile or earlier is hard to come by. The most celebrated surviving biblical texts are the Dead Sea Scrolls. First discovered by accident in 1947, the scrolls represent nearly all 39 books of the Hebrew Bible, at least in fragments. They survived because they were deposited in the perfect environment for preservation: the hot, dry desert. Archaeologists suspect there were at least hundreds more scrolls throughout Israel. But because they were written on papyrus or animal skins, they have long since decomposed.
Even though the earliest of the Dead Sea Scrolls date to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, that doesn't mean that they're the first copies or examples of this work that were ever written. It means that they already stand in a line of tradition that had been established by the time the scrolls were written.
Still, the earliest of the Dead Sea Scrolls dates to at least 300 years after the Babylonian exile. In the absence of proof of earlier text, some scholars claim the entire Bible is pious fiction, and even doubt whether Israel and the Israelites ever existed.
For many of the revisionists, these extreme skeptics, there was no ancient Israel. Israel is an intellectual construct. In other words, these people were not rethinking their past, they were inventing their past. They had no past. So the Bible is a myth, a foundation myth told to legitimate a people who had no legitimacy.